What have you done as a kid that still embarrasses you? Story 1. I wanted to see a crush of mine when I was 12 or 13, so I started going around the block, walking back and forth in hopes of a chance encounter. Turned out he was at his neighbor's house across the street, on the porch, and saw me walking in front of his house 20 times in 1 hour. Yeah. Oh man, your use of chance encounter made me remember doing the same sort of thing. I even hung out with this kid like 2 or 3 times because he lived behind the girl I had a crush on. I've also done this. I rode past a girl's house about 10 or 20 times back and forth. Not hoping for a chance encounter, but thinking she would see me and think I'm busy and have a lot of errands. The next day in class, she passed me a note that said, "Stop riding your bike past my house." Does this count as stalking? Story 2. During a choir concert, I had a solo and my voice cracked terribly on the very last high note to end the song. All I heard was faint awes and one dude dying of laughter. Take it down an octave. I played trombone in jazz band and had to do that at gigs. I know, right? I practically begged my teacher to drop the octave, but she refused because it would ruin the solo. Joke's on her, I ruined it anyways. This is the kind of core memory that would have caused me to never attempt singing in public ever again. Story 3. When I was in high school, I was out on what I thought was a date with this girl. We went to the zoo and then grabbed some food at some place. Afterwards, we had to split up in order to get on our trains, which were going in opposite directions. I awkwardly tried to lean in for a kiss, while she went in to hug me, and I ended up headbutting her in the face and her nose started bleeding. I was so embarrassed, so I just asked, "Are you okay?" And when she said, "I think so," I just waved goodbye and ran into the train station. I had a similar experience on a snowboarding date when I was 15. We had both never boarded, so we got lessons, and this was the date. As we approached the last run of the day while looking over my right shoulder with her on my left waiting for the chairlift, the restraining bar from the chair clipped my helmet and bounced my armored head right into her face. Her nose crunched loudly and began to bleed, but we were stuck on the chairlift going to the top of the hill. I offered her my coat sleeve to soak up the blood because it was red, and I figured it'd blend in, but that didn't alleviate the tension. We didn't go on a second date. Very smooth, boys, though for next time I suggest you at least apologize. Story 4. In 8th grade English class, we were reading some book about an autistic kid and a dog he had. My teacher called on me to do some reading out loud because she knew I wasn't paying attention to the discussion. And when I read the R word, my voice for some reason choked up and let out the awkwardest half chuckle, half gasp. Then I broke out in laughter in front of the whole class. FML. The book was probably the curious incident of the dog in the nighttime. The dog wasn't the kid's though. Didn't you read? He wasn't paying attention. Story 5. One time during gym class in 5th grade, we were all sitting in a circle listening to the teacher's instructions. I had the urge to fart and thought it'd be a nice little quiet one. Little did I know the slick floor we were sitting on amplified the toot, so it sounded like I had pretty much crapped myself. Being a girl, I was super embarrassed, and when the entire class turned my way, I immediately snapped my head to the side and stared at my best friend Shania while plugging my nose and making a disgusted face. She was then known as Shania Stank for the rest of the year. I had to buy her chocolate milk at lunch every day for weeks before she forgave me. She still never lets me live it down. This same story happened to me in 3rd grade, except everybody knew it was me. I had moved to a different town before high school. In 11th grade, I happened to bump into some old classmates from elementary school. Some guys that weren't my friends, just classmates. And that story was one of the first things they brought up. It was horrifying. It took years to get over that story and believe that nobody remembered, because that's always what people say. Nobody really cares or remembers things we find embarrassing, but they do. They always remember. Story 6. My time to shine. This happened in elementary school. I wanted to go to a friend's house, but when my friend and I approached my mom to ask permission, she told me that I had to go watch my brother's football game instead. To express my anger at her decision, I climbed to the top of the tree in our front yard and, with my mom and friend staring up at me in bewilderment, screamed for 30+ minutes straight. I just screeched at the top of my lungs. I've worked on my problem-solving skills since then. Oh god. Whenever I was upset with my parents, I would stomp up to my room, slam my doors as hard as I could, and scream at the top of my lungs. If I was particularly angry, the slamming and screaming would be repeated. This was practically a ritual. I never did it from a treetop though. Well done. Well, obviously I needed to be heard. By the whole neighborhood apparently. You were upset, and you felt the whole neighborhood needed to know. You're lucky your mom didn't record you so all your future boyfriends could know too. Story 7. We were doing that thing in middle school where we were reading a book, and after every paragraph, the next kid would start reading. I counted to which paragraph I was going to be reading, and immediately my stomach lurched. I don't remember the book or the author, but the passage went something like this. I love big juicy pickles. I love to suck the juice off of them, and an entire paragraph about pickles. I made it one sentence before I fell out of my chair laughing. I had to be sent outside because every few minutes I'd burst out laughing. Oh god, I hated that part of English class. I would start laughing even when nothing funny happened, just out of nervousness. Sorry that happened to you, that's pretty embarrassing. Out of all the paragraphs, I had to read that one. It was the beginning of a new chapter, too. Story 8. My brother, who was a darker than usual Hispanic, watched Roots in class when he was in middle school and comes home crying to my mom saying, "I don't want to be a slave." We still bring it up. It still always gets a laugh. Ah, the Roots series. It's responsible for my most embarrassing moment too. It was being rebroadcast on TV when I was 3, and apparently I managed to catch some of it. My family didn't notice or think to talk to me about what I saw. Living in an all-white community in a tiny rural town, I didn't know anything about racial diversity. Fast forward to my family taking a trip, and we're in the Chicago airport. I see people who aren't white for the first time. Putting my knowledge to good use, I point and call out in an incredibly loud kid voice, "Look, Mom, slaves!" Yeah. My parents grabbed me and got the heck out of there. My family's not racist. I'm sure I got a good lesson on racial diversity after that. Oops. This story reminds me of that Patton Oswalt comedy bit where he takes his daughter to a Starbucks for a croissant. If you haven't heard it, go look it up. It's pretty similar and pretty funny. Story 9. I once read a crappy Final Fantasy XI fanfic in front of my speech class during my sophomore year of high school. Why? Final Fantasy XI? The first MMO one? What in there did you even find to write fanfic about? Admittedly, I only played for a year, but it was a bit thin on fanfic hooks, from what I recall. Please don't make me remember. It was some piece of crap about my samurai Mithra character in Yotar Jungle or something, and she's ambushed by a Sahajin. I bet you felt so cool reading your fanfic to your class. It sucks that it embarrasses you now, though. Story 10. When I was in 5th grade, I had a giant crush on the cutest boy in class. His name was Ian. One day our table was talking about gel pens, and they were the in thing, and he said he wanted a blue one. I said he could have mine. Unfortunately, I didn't have a blue gel pen, so that night I forced my mom to take me to the neighborhood store to buy one so I could give it to him. We go to the store, I find the perfect gel pen, and we head to the register to check out. Guess who we ran into on the way? Ian. The sad part is that I don't think he even noticed, and he barely cared when I gave it to him the next day because he clearly did not have the same feelings towards me that I had for him. He went on to be the cutest boy in our middle school, and arguably the cutest boy in our high school as well. I had many classes with him over the years, and my crush didn't totally fade, but I don't think he ever really noticed me. I'm so sorry. This one was a bit sad. You must have been a really sweet and thoughtful young one to go to all that trouble to make Ian happy with that pen. I'm sure you'll make or have made someone a wonderful partner. Thanks. Unfortunately, I'm still waiting for someone who will appreciate the gel pens I give them. Story 11. My school was having one of those scared straight assemblies. They brought in a bunch of former convicts that had served time to tell us about how horrible jail was. One lady told us about her jailmate Nancy. Nancy had apparently gone crazy a few years before and microwaved her child and fed him to her unsuspecting husband. I don't know why, but I just broke out in laughter. I had never heard of something so ridiculously horrible, and the whole room got silent and everyone stared at me while I chuckled to myself about the microwaved baby. Surely that's a wildly inappropriate story to tell school kids. I mean, I get the premise of a scared straight assembly, but could they not have just dragged in a couple of bank robbers or crackheads? That story would scar most people mentally. No wonder you couldn't help but laugh. Story 12. When I was in Catholic daycare, we were looking forward to going on a swimming field trip. On the day of, I was really antsy for it. The daycare head was droning on about us finding a buddy and a bunch of other boring stuff that ADHD-ridden me was getting really sick of hearing. As soon as I heard the words "getting dressed," I have no idea why, but I immediately proceeded to get completely naked in front of the entire classroom to change into my swimming trunks. Everyone just stared at me in shock. I even had time to helicopter my noodle at the other kids while laughing maniacally and twirling my tidy whities around before folding them back into my bag. I then sat down and shut up as though nothing happened. My teacher just looked at me and said, "I meant get dressed once we got there," and then proceeded talking as though nothing happened. Why did I do that? Dude, no, that's brilliant. I bet they still think about you from time to time, wondering how that crazy kid is doing now. I'm surprised the daycare attendant just let it slide. She must have been used to your crazy antics by then. Story 11. When I was in middle school, I wanted to be a rapper. I gave myself the name Lil Diva. I wrote god-awful raps for a bunch of class projects. It pains me to recall those years. How about an example of those raps? Oh gosh, I can't imagine I have any of that anywhere. I just think of something really lame, put Lil Diva somewhere in it, and you'll have a good idea of what we're dealing with. I am not now, nor have I ever been a diva, so I'm not even sure how I arrived at that name. Story 14. I obsessed over Eminem so much that it was even mentioned in the yearbook that I loved him. I had an Eminem t-shirt, which I used to think made me pretty cool. I did several presentations about Eminem. In one of them, I pretended that I was him and rapped in front of my whole class. Yeah, I was a short, awkward girl. Now I just think he's okay and don't really listen to his music. I also took my Harry Potter obsession to an extreme degree. I went to high school with a guy who was so obsessed with Captain Jack Sparrow from the Pirates of the Caribbean that I don't even remember his real name, because everyone just called him Jack. Every year he made it into the yearbook as the guy who was obsessed with Jack Sparrow. You're not alone, OP. Story 15. When I was in elementary school, our class had this thing with a publishing company where each kid in class was allowed to write and illustrate their own book. It had to be under like 15 pages or so, and then the company would print a hard copy of said book for a little money. Really cool thing to do for some little kids, but for me it ended up being embarrassing beyond belief afterwards. To young pre-puberty me, girls were some of the most strange and mystifying beings in the universe. At the time, I seemed to define myself mostly by how much I wasn't a girl, and how weird I thought they were. So naturally, I see this book thing as an opportunity to sort of mock them while presenting my views on their strangeness, and thus was born Why Girls Take So Long in the Bathroom by me. It had crappy illustrations done in marker, bad grammar, and idiotic stuff about how girls are actually aliens and are plotting to take over the world. Pretty much everything a stupid kid would think about his opposite-gendered classmates. My mother still has the book and sometimes takes it out and laughs at it. I just really hope she never shows it to any girlfriends I bring home. Story 16. In high school, I had a bit of a sweating problem. My armpits were soaked all the time, and my hands were clammy regardless of the temperature. I just got back from a small trip to Germany, where I bought this awesome button-up shirt and I wanted to sport it. It was made of a very thin material and was also a very light turquoise color, which I quickly realized would definitely show the sweat. So, being the genius I was back then, I stuffed my pits with tons of toilet paper and headed off to school. It should keep me dry for at least half the day. No, I could make a pit stop in the bathroom and change it out. Well, that day was also the day I had to give a speech in front of my Spanish class. Speeches have always made me nervous, and now I had to attempt one in another language. I wasn't the best student in the world and sucked at Spanish, so I got up there, rattled off my memorized speech, they applauded, and I went back to my seat. No big deal, right? It was then that I saw a huge wad of soaked toilet paper that must have fallen out and was right there in front of the class sitting on the floor. My stomach dropped, and I could have just died right then. I think the rest of the class was equally as embarrassed for me because everyone acted like it wasn't right in the middle of the room, and the rest of the speakers had to walk around it. They must have seen it tumble out. Lucky for me, it never came up or was mentioned ever after that. Oh, and this was also during first period. I had soaked that TP in no time at all. Mate, sounds like a great room of kids. Seriously. I think I lucked out. When I put myself in their shoes from their perspective, they probably just thought it was a Kleenex or TP I could have been using for a cold. Let's hope this is what they thought. Story 17. When I was a freshman, a couple friends and I snuck into a senior's graduation party. They had karaoke and I thought it was my time to shine. It was my turn to go. I had the perfect song picked out. I'm too sexy for my shirt, too sexy for my shirt, so sexy hurts. I proceeded to take my shirt off, started swinging it around my head and even flossed it between my legs. The look on everyone's faces of disgust as they watched a chubby white kid embarrass himself in front of 50+ people. At the end, I tried to find the hottest girl out in the crowd. I then threw my shirt at her and put my thumb and pinky finger up to my ear and mouth, signaling for her to call me. Oh god. I actually became anxious while reading this. So cringeworthy. You poor thing. For some reason, I totally forgot about it until I read this thread. And you know what is pretty bad too? We snuck away from the party and started messing with houses around the party. The owners of the houses called the cops, and they ended up coming and busting some kids for underage drinking. Fortunately, you only embarrassed yourself in front of a group of graduating seniors, but this does sound like a hilarious deleted scene from Superbad. Story 18. In kindergarten, we were in a playhouse. It was a freaking cool playhouse, but I digress. We were just having fun playing around in the house. A bunch of us and one of my best friends, Cody, was sitting facing the opposite direction with my other good friend Nathan. What happens next, I have no explanation for my actions. I was right behind him, stood up, placed my butt right on his head, and farted on it. I could feel the vibrations surround his scalp and escape through my cheeks. He of course yelled and was like, "Gross!" Long story short, I had to sit on the thinking chair for some time. I thought it would be funny, but everyone thought I was gross. God, I was an awkward kid. I don't know what sick and twisted place you came from, but from where I hail, you would be regarded as a god amongst schoolyard tricksters. Story 19. When I was 3 or 4, my father took the family to a soccer game that he was reffing at, and, well, I had to take a dump. I asked my brother where the toilet was and he pointed me to the restroom. I walked in and there was spiderwebs in the stall, and I was scared of spiders, so I did the only thing possible and went back to the benches and took a crap under them. Yes, people were sitting above me. They stopped the game and announced over the intercom, "Whoever's kid is taking a dump under the bleachers, please get him." My dad made eye contact with me. He told my sister to get me and go to the car. He never took us out after, even to this day. You should not get this mad at your 3-year-old child. He lives to make mistakes. Also, who sends a 4-year-old by themselves to a public bathroom at a soccer game? Most 4-year-olds still need to be reminded to flush and wash their hands, let alone finding their way to a bathroom by themselves and returning unscathed. Story 20. I dressed, talked, and acted like a pirate for about a year when I was 16. I wore a full costume sometimes, including an eye patch, a beard, I'm female, and maybe even a sword for special occasions. My parents encouraged it. They gave me a treasure map on my birthday and made me kayak from a river to a beach where a treasure chest was buried. I dug it up. It was full of chocolate coins, plastic gold jewelry, and several video games I wanted. I even had a pirate name. Sounds like you would have gotten along great with my buddy from high school, Captain Jack. I can't say I blame either of you though. I thought pirates were super cool when I was a young teen too. I guess we all have Pirates of the Caribbean to thank for that. Story 21. I've got one for this. The other day, someone asked me what the most embarrassing thing that ever happened to me as a child was, and this is what I came up with. It's not a bad memory, but it's definitely the thing that still gives me that burning in my cheeks and neck feeling the strongest. When I was 9 or 10, I was at the supermarket with my older brother who was 17 or 18 at the time. Our mom liked to shop late in the evenings to avoid the rush, and she'd take 3 or 4 hours, so we'd get bored and start messing around. My brother was an adult, and I was a kid, so of course we did stupid stuff like wear bicycle helmets and fight with toy lightsabers, or play hide and seek in the clothes racks. One time we were rearranging some plastic flowers to spell dirty words, and a couple girls walked by us. They were probably only a year or 2 older than me, but you know, when you're a kid, everyone older than you looks like an adult. I said to my brother, "Hey, that girl's pretty." I didn't mean it. I wasn't really old enough to be attracted to girls. It was just something I'd heard my brother say, so obviously I had to repeat it. Kind of absent-mindedly, he responded, "Yeah, you should tell her that." A heartbeat passed, and then you could almost see a light bulb appear over his head. He was a big brother after all. So he fixed me up with one of those nasty plastic flowers and pushed me towards the girl, who was now browsing CDs. I distinctly remember thinking of Michigan J. Frog, although I didn't know that name at the time, being pushed onto the stage and clamming up. I was a shy kid, and it was all too easy to picture myself on stage in front of that girl, towering over me in all of her 5th grade-ish wonder and becoming an ordinary frog. But my brother was watching, so I couldn't back down. I tapped the girl on the shoulder and held the flower, a blue rose with a plastic stem and fabric petals, out to her. You're pretty," I managed through quivering lips. She smiled and graciously took the flower, and relief hit me like a cool wind. Although of course it was scentless, she raised it to her face and smelled it, and I'll never forget it. As she inhaled, color spread across her cheeks, as if the rose were its source. I think that was the first time I was ever attracted to a girl, and to this day I think it is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. I could feel the blood rushing to my face as I realized I was staring, and turned and ran and hid behind my brother. It isn't the hiding that still makes me feel embarrassed. It's the way she blushed, and how small I felt, and how big that feeling was. Or something. I don't know exactly why, but I still blush whenever I think about it. Story 22. I have several. When I was 15, I lost my virginity. I wouldn't shut up about it. I talked about it in detail to 2 seniors in my creative writing class. I barely knew them. In 8th grade, I'd write deep song lyrics on my math papers. My teacher thought I had a crush on him. All throughout elementary school, I was the kid who cried at everything. When I was maybe 12 or 13, me and my mom were using an automated checkout machine at the grocery store. It was messing up, so I loudly said, "This machine can eat me." I didn't know what it meant, but I heard it in a movie. And lastly, probably one of my worst moments, at 14, while making out with my first boyfriend, my mind drifted off to Step Brothers since I'd watched it the day before. Out of frickin' nowhere, I whisper, "I want you out of my effing house," to him. We broke up shortly after that. The Step Brothers reference was an outstanding move. Only if he followed it up with, "I'm going to take a pillowcase and fill it full of bars of soap and beat the crap out of you." Story 23. I crapped my pants in the middle of the mall when I was 12. My parents and I went shopping. We made a quick stop at the food court. I chose KFC. No big deal, right? Wrong. 12-year-old me had a soft stomach. The KFC turned my insides into a racetrack. The food flew through me like it was trying to set a world record. I'm as far from the bathrooms as you can get. A few minutes later, I can tell it's coming. I feel it. I run. I get halfway there and it starts. I can't stop it. I'm wearing shorts. Crap runs down my leg. I'm being stared at as I keep running. I get to the toilet. It's too late. It's a salvage job now. I try to clean up as best I can and get out. Easily the most embarrassing thing. It's okay, man. I know those feels. You had it easy. I was in 6th grade at a school disco where literally most of the school was, including all the cool kids. I started feeling sick, and as I got to the bathroom, just as I was opening the stall, I couldn't stop it. I got bullied pretty hard after that, and it was a horrible time for me as a teen. I can't even imagine it around peers. Story 24. Multiple times at the movie theater when I was around 8 to 12, I would go up to people who were about to enter Harry Potter movies or R-rated movies and ask them if they were Christian. If they said they were, I would keep pressing the issue because in my mind, surely they weren't Christians if they were seeing things like that. That was one of the few things I was never punished for, despite it possibly being the worst thing I ever repeatedly did in public. If I was older, I probably would have been kicked out of the theater for harassing the other customers. You were pretty young. Was this something that you were encouraged to do, or did you do it on your own? I remember arguing with kids who liked Harry Potter that Christians shouldn't have anything to do with it. For a while, that was a really big deal in some Christian circles, and so I heard a lot about how evil and demonic the series was. Both. My parents and my friends' parents almost all didn't like such content, and they all advocated giving out gospel tracts, but I was the one who put the two ideas together and specifically targeted those who saw the movies. Luckily, my parents weren't as extreme as some people I know. My parents didn't care about Pokemon, for instance, since it was obvious it did not take place in our own world. The idea of human protagonists from recognizable locations in our world using magic was off-putting to them, though. I hope you outgrew this pretty quickly. People don't take very kindly to religious guilt being forced upon them by strangers, let alone precocious children. Story 25. I was one of those smarmy jerks that would only do things that none of my friends were doing. So when everyone else was buying clothes from Abercrombie and American Eagle and listening to the Black Eyed Peas and Britney Spears, I was being my little contrarian self. I wasn't nearly as cool as I thought I was, though, because I bought my clothes from Walmart and I thought that Green Day was totally not mainstream. That's pretty embarrassing in retrospect. I felt good about not listening to popular music in my early teens, too. I only listened to classical music for a while, and when people would ask me who my favorite artist was, I would say it was Dvorak. There was nothing wrong with classical music, but I must have been really obnoxious. Story 26. When I was in high school, my friends and I used to make videos. We eventually formed an amateur video club called Skit Studio. We would meet once a month at a friend's house, and we would come up with ideas and make amateur movies. The worst movie we made was for my literature class. We were told to make a Hamlet video. Earlier in the year, we had learned about fertility religions and origin stories, and we were told if we incorporated themes from past units, we could get extra credit. So we made a 14-minute epic on Hamlet with phallic and sex symbols galore, and hidden innuendos at every turn. Nothing was spared. Even me drawing my sword was a fertility symbol. Holy crap, did we go completely freaking nuts. Ophelia was apparently Britney Spears living in a trailer who was personally told by Cocapelli to sleep with Hamlet at every waking moment. We lasted 5 minutes into the initial screening before the teacher cut us off. The final straw was after a student got so offended that she walked out of the room. Rumors spread abound, which escalated to the idea that we somehow had created a Hamlet-themed porno. We still got an A. The final showdown in the film film was a Mortal Kombat themed ninja battle with an accurately made video and HUD graphics. There were no female actors in the entire play, in keeping with Shakespearean tradition. Sadly, the film has since been lost to me and my friends, or I would have put it on YouTube. That Friday, we got drunk and watched the entire thing at my house. Too much fanfare and quoting. I'm ashamed of that video, and I'm quite glad it has been lost to time. Story 27. Just before spring break in grade 11, we were asked to clear the classrooms of desks and chairs and bring them to the gym so that the classrooms could be thoroughly cleaned. My last class of the day was on the second floor, so after picking up about 4 plastic chairs, I started down the stairs. I missed a step, causing all 4 chairs and myself to careen down the stairs, knocking the wind out of me and causing the 300 to 400 people in the foyer to suddenly go dead silent and turn to stare at me as I attempted to get back to my feet and reassure everyone I was fine but couldn't breathe. This was the first and only time I have ever gotten a standing ovation filled with cheers from a room packed full of people. This event also earned me the nickname Chairs for the rest of my high school days. This could have ended way worse. You could have been hurt, they could have all laughed, and the nickname isn't so bad. But I would have been mortified at the time too. Story 28. When I was a freshman, I had a crush on a guy I had never spoken to. He was the valedictorian of the senior class, and I was peripherally involved in some of the same academic-themed extracurriculars as he was. I basically decided that he was so smart and dreamy, and unattainable enough that I didn't have to do anything as intimidating as interacting with him for real, and spent a lot of time talking to my friends about it. I'm not sure how it got started, but we ended up with this running inside joke about him being in a geek boy band with the hot salutatorian and a couple of the other smart kids from the senior class. We wrote fake songs, parodies of real boy bands, with the lyrics changed to be about math and named the band. I was really into my Angel Fire website at the time, so I made a little fake fan site for our fake band and used his real name on it several times. The joke ran its course after a few weeks, and I promptly forgot about it, and forgot all about my crush on this guy after he graduated. Fast forward to about 4 years later, when Googling yourself has become a thing, and I got an email at the address on my forgotten Angel Fire site. It was from the former valedictorian's fiance and a few of his friends, who had stumbled across this site and found it hilarious. I deleted everything in a panic. I still get a little red when I think about how my teenage fangirling of some guy who had no idea who I was ended up being seen by him and all of his friends. I used my first name on the website as well, which has an unusual spelling. It was a fairly small school, so there's actually a good chance he was able to look in an old yearbook and see exactly who I was. Story 29. I was alone in my parents' bedroom talking to myself in the mirror, imagining what I would say if my ex-boyfriend showed up and wanted to get back together. After like 5 minutes of this, my mom says, "Who are you talking to?" She was in the bed the whole time. I still cringe when I think about it. Thanks for watching and/or listening all the way to the end. If you have a similar story that you'd like to share with us, please leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed your time here, please leave a like and subscribe. For more videos like this one right now, please stop by our channel. Thanks again, and see you next time.